5 children vanished. No remains, no answers. Just fire, silence, and questions that still burn 80 years later. The official story? They died in a house fire. But if that's true, why did the phone line get cut? Why was the ladder missing? Why were there no bones in the ashes? And why, years later, did someone mail their parents a photo of one of the boys, all grown up? This isn't just an unsolved mystery. It's a case that feels like someone wanted it buried. This is the story of the Sodder children. Before we start, click like and subscribe for more true crime contents like this, and remember to put your theory in the comment. Fayetteville, West Virginia, a quiet coal town tucked into the Appalachian Hills. It was Christmas Eve, 1945, the first peacetime Christmas after the war. The Sodder home sat on a rural road just outside town, a large, 2-story wooden house filled with noise, warmth, and children. George Sodder, a proud Italian immigrant, ran a successful trucking business. Jennie, his wife, kept the home alive. Together, they had 10 children. 9 still lived at home. That evening, the Sodder house glowed with holiday spirit. A decorated Christmas tree blinked with electric lights in the living room. The fireplace crackled. Laughter and footsteps echoed through the halls. The children were giddy, full of sugar, secrets, and the joy only Christmas Eve can bring. 5 of them, Morris, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jennie Jr., 8, and Betty, just 5, begged to stay up past bedtime. They wanted to play with their new toys, listen to the radio, and fall asleep under the lights of the tree. Jennie agreed, as long as they remembered to lock the doors and turn out the lights. She kissed them goodnight and went upstairs to bed with her husband and 2-year-old Sylvia. By 10 p.m., the house had quieted, or so it seemed. Then, at 12:30 a.m., the phone rang. Jennie, still half asleep, padded downstairs in her robe. On the other end of the line was a woman's voice. Unfamiliar, strange. She asked for someone Jennie didn't know. In the background, there was laughter, glasses clinking. A party? Jennie told her she had the wrong number. The woman let out a chilling, deliberate laugh and hung up. Uneasy, Jennie noticed something else. The lights were still on. The front door was unlocked. The curtains hadn't been drawn. The children, who had promised to clean up, were nowhere in sight. Maybe they'd gone to the attic bedroom and forgotten. She turned off the lights, locked the door, and went back to bed. 15 minutes later, she heard a sharp, heavy sound on the roof, like a fistful of gravel or a body landing hard. Then silence. At 1:30 a.m., smoke began to pour up the staircase. Within seconds, the house was chaos. George and Jennie scrambled to wake the children. Sylvia was scooped up and carried outside. 2 of the older boys, John and George Jr., made it out too, but the staircase to the attic was already a wall of fire. George shouted the names of his 5 missing children. Nothing, no voices, no screams, just crackling wood and rising heat. In a panic, he smashed a window to re-enter the house, slicing open his arm. He tried to climb, but he couldn't reach the attic window. He ran to grab the ladder he always kept propped against the side of the house. It was gone. Next, he sprinted to his coal trucks. He thought he could drive one up beside the house and climb on top. But both trucks, which had been working perfectly the day before, refused to start. He grabbed a barrel of water and threw it at the flames. It was frozen solid. Jennie stood in the snow in her nightgown, clutching the baby, screaming her children's names into the dark. No answer. The house collapsed in 45 minutes, reduced to smoldering ash before firefighters even arrived. But there was one thing that no one could understand. Despite the inferno, there were no bodies, no remains, no sign of the 5 missing children who had been inside. The fire's heat had been intense, yes, but it wasn't enough to consume human bodies completely. Fire experts were baffled. The flames hadn't burned hot enough to reduce everything to ash, yet there wasn't even a trace of the children. The rest of the house was gone. Everything that could burn had burned. But no charred remains of the children were found in the ruins. It was as if they had disappeared into thin air. Even the firemen who had fought the blaze and combed through the wreckage were stunned. There was no sign of any human remains, and there had been no other signs of the children leaving the house. They were gone, vanished without a trace. This eerie absence only added to the confusion and horror of the situation. Where were the children? What had happened to them? And how had they vanished from the scene of such destruction? The local authorities, though perplexed, quickly formed a conclusion. The children must have perished in the fire, their bodies lost in the chaos. But George and Jennie refused to accept that. They knew in their hearts that their children weren't dead. They couldn't be. They had to be alive somewhere. George, a man of relentless determination, decided to take matters into his own hands. He launched his own investigation, poring over every detail of the fire. He spoke with the fire chief and visited the site repeatedly, trying to find any evidence that might explain what had happened. He meticulously examined the house's structure, the remains of the fire, and the surrounding area, convinced that something didn't add up. The fire experts had said that such an intense blaze would have left some kind of remains, ashes, bone fragments, something. But there was nothing. Only the burnt timbers and charred rubble. He even went so far as to hire his own private detective to follow up on any leads. He spoke to neighbors, tracked down people who might have seen something the night of the fire. But all he was left with were strange whispers, rumors that seemed to swirl around the town, never quite making sense. One rumor stood out to George. People claimed to have seen a strange truck parked near the house the night of the fire. A large vehicle, possibly a flatbed truck, driven by men who were unfamiliar to the area. But no one could say for sure who they were, or what their connection to the Sodders might have been. The sightings were vague, fragmented, as if the people who spoke of them weren't sure whether they had imagined it or had actually seen something. But George couldn't shake the feeling that the truck was somehow connected to the disappearance of his children. Then, as if the universe was mocking him, a letter arrived at the Sodder house months after the fire. The envelope was postmarked from a distant city, but there was no return address. Inside was a photograph, a blurry snapshot of a young man who appeared to be in his 20s. The man had dark hair and a strong jawline, much like George's missing son Maurice, who was just 14 years old at the time of the fire. The caption on the back read, "This is Morris Sodder. He is alive." The handwriting was crude, unsteady, as if written in a hurry. George and Jennie were stunned. Could this be real? Could one of their children actually be alive? It was a glimmer of hope in the darkest of circumstances, but it only raised more questions. If Morris was alive, where were the others? What had happened to them? And who had sent this photo? The letter didn't just shake George and Jennie's belief in the fire's conclusion. It sent them down a dark, winding path of suspicion and fear. Someone had taken their children, and that person, or persons, had been hiding in plain sight all along. The idea that the fire had been set on purpose, that it had been a cover-up, began to make more sense to them. Maybe their children had been kidnapped long before the fire ever started. Maybe they had been taken as part of something far more sinister than a mere tragedy. Theories began to swirl. Could it have been someone with a grudge against George? Someone with a vendetta who had known just how to strike? Or was it someone from outside the area? People who had planned the kidnapping meticulously. And why had they taken the children? Was there a deeper motive? The mystery deepened with each passing year. George and Jennie, unable to let go, continued their search for the truth. They followed up on every lead, but the trail was always cold. The authorities, meanwhile, had all but given up. The case remained closed, but the Sodders refused to stop. But no matter how much they searched, no matter how many people they spoke to, they never found their children. No one was ever arrested, no one ever confessed, and the answers remained as elusive as the smoke that had once filled their home. A haunting mystery that would never be solved. To this day, the fate of the 5 Sodder children remains one of America's most chilling and unexplained disappearances.